Hey, everybody. Happy Friday, and welcome to another episode of PlexTrac's Friends Fridays. I'm Anna Lee from the Content Marketing Department here at PlexTrac with, of course, our founder and CTO, Dan DeCloss, and our very special guest, Mimi Gross. So I'd like everyone to just take a minute and introduce themselves. Everybody knows Dan. Dan, we don't care about you. Mimi, why don't you introduce yourselves to us today?
Well, thanks. I'm Mimi Gross, and I like to call myself the cybersecurity matchmaker. Nobody's taken that yet, so I took it. And that's what, I've been doing for the past 7 years, just kind of really getting into this community, trying to get to know everybody through a recruiting lens initially, but always just, some people are just like naturally a connector. And so I've always you meet someone, you think, who do they need to meet? And you make that happen. And if you're a connector, that's the best feeling in the world. So that's what I've been doing in our space in cybersecurity for a long time. A few years ago, I went very heavy on trying to get to know all the marketers. And I think I could say I hit success when the Cybersecurity Marketing Society tapped me to actually come on and partner as their matchmaker / career strategist, which the career strategy is kind of the later piece that I've come into, which is just kind of helping people crystallize their career stories. Marketers are amazing at telling the story of a product. And when it comes to telling the story of them, they can sometimes get stuck. And so that just very naturally, very organically became something additionally that I do help people with a lot. So that's me today. Still doing the matchmaking, a little less from the recruiting angle, but just kind of keeping my finger on the pulse of the job market in our space. And it's just obviously an ever-changing, such an interesting evolution. So
that's what we're going to talk about today a little bit is the cybersecurity job market right now, but more specifically an area that, Dan and I have been in, and that's, startups. And what does that outlook look like, particularly from like the employee perspective? What is it like to work at a startup? Is it the right fit for you? What does it look like in terms of the job market right now in cybersecurity, particularly maybe tech more broadly? We're going to kind of spend some time talking about that today with Mimi, since she is an expert in this area and in cybersecurity particularly. I actually met Mimi at a cybersecurity marketing event at Black Hat a few years ago. So yes, I'd say, as I'm very new to cybersecurity, you have done well meeting all those marketers.
Oh my gosh, that was the best. I think that was the best marketing money I ever spent was on getting that suite. I got a suite at the Four Seasons at Black Hat and basically had snacks and drinks probably 3 times a day for all the marketers to come chill and hang out. And it was so fun. I mean, people came multiple times. It was great.
Yeah, I did. And it was so welcoming and just a way to get connected with other people.
So yeah, it was great meeting you. And now we're here.
But well, why don't we kick it off and talk just a little bit about the cybersecurity job market, right now. And Mimi, I'd love to get kind of your take on where we've kind of been over the course of the last year, where you think we're going.
Okay, so it's interesting. I would say it's very hard to put your finger on the science of it. There's a lot of anecdotal instances and a lot of anecdotal data that you can gather from just really talking to a lot of different people. If you want to see things as being horrible and you see all the layoffs, you could see it that way. But I talked to too many people to see such a limited reality. There's a lot of hiring going on. I understand. I think you're doing some hiring. And the hiring is, though, it's more strategic. It's definitely more risk adverse. I would say there's a lot of the layoffs were really an overcorrection from a time where people were just throwing money at hires, hoping that it would solve the pain of the immediate issues facing a company, especially startups, I will say. Bigger companies as well, but startups had the money to just throw money at problems from a human resource perspective. So a lot of the layoffs that I've taken note of and looked at and looked under the hood at were definitely that. It was companies that, as a recruiter, you know, I saw were just slopping up all the good people and, just paying them insane amounts to keep them there, raises, 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 raises until, what we have today. So that's like my really high level. I would say throwing in a little positivity to what's going on, because I really don't see doors being shuttered. That's when we would start to say, oh, we're really looking at a dark time, is when you would see companies really closing down, not companies getting more efficient with their funds and things like that. So that's, I don't want anyone to call me, like rose-colored glasses, but it's real.
Well, and I think from my perspective, we experienced, we were in the wave of like, hey, there's lots of activity in the market. We were fighting for people, as well, in kind of the late 2021, early 2022, is when we, got our Series B funding. And so I think we definitely noticed, that there's just like so much activity, and some of it, I think what I've learned through all this is like sometimes like if it to trust your gut a little bit. If it doesn't make sense, it probably isn't, even if you don't necessarily know all the factors behind it. And I would agree. I think that a couple of years ago there was an influx of cash into the market. It was money that needed to get invested based on not getting invested in 2020. Right. And it kind of started to build up. And so, people started investing money, and like, founders and startups, they're like, well, how do, you're under some kind of, I would say, intrinsic pressure to like, how are you going to spend the money, as opposed to like, what is the, anytime you're raising capital, a founder is going to be asked like, what are you going to use the money for? So you kind of have to have an answer to that question. And a lot of times the best way to spend money in terms of, where you truly see it as an investment is people, right? Like, well, if I bring on people, they'll help solve the problems that we need to grow, and that can be very dangerous too, in terms of like, it's not just hire people to throw at a problem, or just hire people expecting that to like translate into immediate growth for a company. And I think that's where you saw that, that overcorrection. Like there was a large influx of people being hired, and now kind of coming back to like, hey, well, this is actually where we should be, right, in terms of like our size of a company, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, I love what you said about kind of following the instinct. It's one of my core recruiting and job search strategy philosophies, which is that, like if you want the best book about recruiting and searching for a job, take like any dating book. And it works better for dating than it does. I mean, it works better for recruiting and job search than it does even for dating, because dating's so complicated. There's too much emotion. With job search, it's the same principles. Follow your instincts. If there are red flags, they probably are real, but definitely look, because if it's a pink flag, that could end up actually being a plus for you. But if it's a red flag, that, then that means there's a reason. By pink flag, I mean, looking for opportunistic situations where maybe other people don't see the value, like a Warren Buffett type of scenario for hiring and job search, where, you might not be, let's say for a job searcher, it might not be the hottest company on the market that's growing like that, but you like the people, you like the problems they have, because everybody has problems. But you like those problems. They're problems that you aren't afraid of. You're the best person for that job. So another person might come and not see that as being an amazing job. That's an amazing job for you. And on the hiring side, same thing. You see a candidate who maybe isn't the most technically in demand, or isn't coming out of your competitor, or whatever it is, hasn't done exactly the thing that you dream will happen from this hire, but has some very core strengths that are missing in your environment. That would be an amazing value-driven hire for that company. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of things like that. And it's a little long-winded, but what I wanted to point to is that during the abundant period, people were either ignoring red flags for the sake of wanting something more than they wanted the right thing, or they were ignoring value that they could have maximized on. And that's kind of where I think we sit now. Like red flags are redder than ever and people are terrified of them. At the same time, I think a lot of companies are finding, let's make a value-driven hire here. And people are looking for jobs that make them happy. And they're not, for startups, for example, like I don't think people are thinking anymore, oh, is this going to be the startup that's going to make me rich? They're thinking, is this the startup where I'm going to enjoy myself? I'm going to be able to build something real.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's a good call out, right? Is like that. Hey, I think my advice to anybody in terms of, and I think even my exposure to on the back end of like all these, like, the company can still be very, very large and still have a lot of the same issues that a company, that is very, very small has in terms of like how they're managing their company, how they're managing their burn rate, all those other metrics, right? And so size can be deceiving for a company, and even like revenue can be a deceiving. It's again, it comes down to like, the biggest can fail if they're not managing the company well. But like also, having the notion of like, hey, is this a good place for me to further my career and enjoy the people I'm going to be working with, and then the cherry on top would be like there is that value that I'm having some equity in the company, and there can be some
Sure.
payout at the end, right? Yeah.
Oh, sure. That doesn't go away. I'm just
Right.
saying that
No, but it's not.
Nobody's going to be like, oh, and you might like, people will make their own value judgments about that.
Right.
In fact, drinking the Kool-Aid may even happen once they're in the company, as opposed to needing to feed them the Kool-Aid in the hiring process.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, yeah, we've kind of got into it, but let's talk about a few more of the really positive aspects of choosing a startup. Dan, you were just writing on this topic in your newsletter about sort of the market maybe making a little shift in the positive direction. Maybe we'll expect to see a little bit more influx of funding and some of those things bouncing back a little bit, which could result in more opportunities at startups and smaller companies again. So what are some of those pros? What are some, Mimi, when you're talking to people, what do you see as some of the major benefits of choosing a startup?
Well, the benefits are usually not the benefits. Not always true, but I just felt like I had to say that. Because you set me up for it. But I think the benefits are, it's interesting. The benefits are not for everyone. So it is true. If you're looking for the illusion, and Dan, I think you're 100% right. It is an illusion that there's stability with a company who's on a certain revenue track. I mean, you hear people talking all the time about saying, okay, I'm looking for my next role and they have to have this revenue. They could have posted that revenue and tomorrow it's millions less than, what they've had to last post. So, there's always illusion when it comes to these things, and everybody really is making their own risk assessment. So I think, you have to be the type of person that can handle quick change, that can change course. So you have to have that as a prerequisite, I think, if you're going to even be able to handle the benefits of a startup. Because, I've also seen I actually wrote a chapter of my book about this, the manic pixie dream girl concept when it comes to, which is like the idea of, this like girl in a lot of movies in the 2000s that were the early 2000s that were like basically had no personality, but were like these very whimsical type of like, what's her name? Zooey Deschanel. Like she's like the typical, and like she doesn't really have personality, but she's whimsical and everybody thinks that she's just going to bring life to everything. So some people see a startup opportunity or an exciting hire as being like, oh, we're going to bring some sparkle in life. And it's this exciting thing. But it has to fit you or there's nothing there. It's really just this like fun little fantasy. So I think that really the benefits of startup life are the challenges. Just like you have to really thrive on change and enjoy it. Um, the major thing that is another prerequisite is the ability to take ownership over something that's not even necessarily your fault. And I find that the people who just, and again, I know I haven't said the benefits yet, but I'm saying a lot of the things that I've seen people think it looks exciting. So let's say the benefit isn't that it looks, let's just say somebody thinks it's exciting. If you're going to blame anyone or you can't handle taking blame for something that's not 100% your fault, then you will always be unhappy because you'll always be looking. The blame chain is the most toxic cycle of a startup. Like sales will blame marketing, marketing will blame product will blame, like the core, founders and all these things. And then the founders will blame the VCs and everybody who's blocking them from doing their dream. So if you are that type, you'll get caught up in a toxic cycle. But if you can take ownership, that's the best indicator you will be successful at a startup and be able to benefit from the benefits. And the top benefit I've seen is career skyrocketing. So in a larger environment, there's going to be a lot of people who will be above you or next to you doing things that you might want to be exposed to or that you could be really good at. And it will be considered stepping on toes to even get into it. So I think that that's what I've seen people just come back to me who aren't lifers, come back to me after, entering startup and just saying, wow, this accelerated my career 5 years ahead. Something that I would have had to wait for somebody to retire or get fired or quit. So that's the huge benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. And I say, like, having built a company, having built a startup from the ground up, right? And it's funny because, like, I think everybody that's like been in any stage of a company, they still consider themselves a startup. Like, I would still consider us a startup, even though we're very well funded and like, have Series B, but like, there's just it's always new. Every stage is something different. And I think that's another benefit, is that if you come in early, you get exposed to like all the different things that go on, right? And it's a great learning opportunity, just like for growth. And like, Anna can even attest to, like, you end up wearing a lot of different hats than you actually signed on for. And that's that ownership piece too, of just like, hey, we're all on a team trying to figure out how to get it done. It does nobody any good to try and get into that blame cycle. There's a book that I often talk about in our company, and I show the illustration. It's called the Oz Principle. And it has a great illustration about the accountability line, where staying above the accountability line is like, hey, as a team, we're going to see the problems, we're going to own the problems, we're going to solve them and execute on them, right? As opposed to staying below the line. What I call below the line is, that notion of like, well, it's not my job, it's somebody else's fault, that blame game thing, and that doesn't do anybody any good, right? Regardless of what's on.
It's literally the downfall. I've seen startups fall apart.
Yeah.
Completely because of that. Just
yeah.
Down to the founders who like weren't able to see their own part in everything.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, it takes some self-reflection for sure. And it takes a lot of just fortitude, as coming into an early stage company, that like, hey, there's going to be good days and bad days, and everybody's going to, cheer and cry together. And so
there's been cheering and crying. I confess.
Yeah, no, look, I think that startups really like to look for people who are not considered job hoppers, which is, a bad term in my world, because especially these days, you never know. But I do think something that hiring managers can look at is, was there a time or two where they stuck around? Focus on that and ask them why.
Right.
Because and I talk about this with a lot of just job search clients and with hiring clients, that just because they've had a hard go of it for the past few years, now get curious about the times that they didn't. And it's very likely you could be the next place that they would be able to stick around
Mhm.
if you know why. So, yeah, I mean, I think that people who have that stay withedness at all in their makeup, there's something there to look at. Yeah, you have to be able to um, get hurt, feel sad, and then move along, get back to work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
so that's interesting.
You mentioned, that there can be a lot of opportunity, and that I think there's a lot of opportunity, not just to learn and grow, but specifically to break in to a new
Yeah,
industry, because you might get a chance that no one else is willing to give you, which is what happened to me. I was in higher ed and nonprofit work, doing exactly what I'm doing now, but to break into this industry was I wouldn't have had that opportunity without PlexTrac taking a chance on me very early when they just needed help. Thanks, Dan.
so that's interesting. I want to ask you, and I hope this is okay, just because there is an element that I've seen where startups are risk adverse when
Mm,
it comes to hiring somebody from outside the industry. So I hope it's okay. I want to ask you, when you joined, what was it that was that bridge that they knew with certainty that you would be able to kind of grow into that? Because I think a lot of people want to know that. I see a lot of people trying to break in. And I think it requires either a person bridge, but not just a person bridge, because that's never enough, but also a skill bridge or an experience bridge. And I always recommend people to have both, because
mm,
then it makes it easy for the company to then see the potential. So
mhm.
can you remember back, and maybe even Dan, can you guys remember back to when you were hired, and what did you know, Dan, about Anna that that you felt that the risk was not high, that should be able to get on
Yeah,
board?
I mean, I think that's a great question. And so hopefully it won't make Anna blush too much. But I think, like, definitely knew Anna from, we do go back. We have a history, but like, so I've known Anna for a long time, and know what she's capable of in terms of just, so I knew the person that she was, right, in terms of like being able to do the research, dig in, figure stuff out, solve problems, right. And I think that's in any hire, like especially early on, that's the biggest thing I always looked for, is like, does this person have the ability to go research and solve problems? Like, I
That's
mean,
great.
we had a lot of other folks in the company, that knew the cybersecurity industry, so I felt fairly comfortable that like we could at least guide,
That's
some of the content, right, as long as we had somebody that was, could do it on their own, was a good writer, was able
great.
to, research and things like that. So I mean, I think that was the biggest, draw. I think that, yeah, we probably would have been much more cautious with somebody that we didn't know at all, right? Like,
Right, but I love what you said, that the experience that you had knowing Anna, you were, professionally, is that you were somebody who could research problems, and I think that's just really so important for people to hear. If you have a problem, that you're not going to become like a blocker in the flow.
yeah,
And I think people would really, and then I also liked, Dan, what you said, just I think these are two like basically groundbreaking things for people to hear. You may not see it as so much, but I think anyone who's looking, right now to join either you guys or other startups, you know, asking if they have resources of people where they might need that training and that the company feels confident. And this idea that you can show a company that you can research problems. I think that's huge. It speaks exactly to what we said before about, somebody who's accountable and can
right,
carry things.
And I think from my side of that conversation, I had a fairly long background. I taught education class. I mean, I taught at the college level for like 15 years, classes in technical communication. And
Okay.
that's one thing I was constantly telling students is that your experiences, even if they aren't directly in what it is that you want to do, you have to connect the dots, because it is really truly. And now that I've been here for a while, doing what I was doing in higher education, selling and promoting and marketing very expensive college experiences for students isn't that much different than
Yes. And
a
you
SaaS
were able to
platform.
make that bridge, and
Yeah,
you were
and
able to
so
connect those
yeah,
dots.
And I think it also is about being very realistic about what it is that you do well, where you can add value. So I came in and I was like, okay, Dan, I don't want to be a marketing director or anything. These are the areas where I think I can add value to you right now. And, did I end up doing many different things? Yes. But
those things that you were so confident in,
yeah.
I love how you said that I can do and bring value right now. And that's another really good guiding principle for people looking are the things that you're good at, what that company needs to solve right now.
Yeah. And I was trying not to oversell myself because I knew I didn't want to get in over my head. So if these were not the things that they needed at that point, then, I didn't want to take that job. I didn't want to start there. So that,
ironically, Dan, you didn't have to even look at the potential as much as you could look at that the things you needed right now were there. And I think that's also something that sometimes founders and hiring managers are pressured to see potential, and it messes with their instinct because potential is great on a certain level, but being able to be clear about what the issues are today, what the challenges are, and that this person can address those today with potential for growth, you can deal with that later.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
A lot of people hire on a kind of like inflated potential, fantasy idea of something. And I love just hearing a really concrete example of that. And then you took what you could do that day, and then you just expanded and grew as you became a part of things. And that really is sustainable.
I think one other area that I see that maybe positive or negative for people that are joining, especially early stage startups, is that you may end up being more of a generalist before you're a specialist. So if that makes sense, you may end up doing whatever's thrown at you. I mean, hey, I did a stint in HR for 3 months and we hired like 30 people. I'm not an HR person at all. It's just what needed to be done right then. And so we figured it out and did it. And what a great experience. And do I want to do it again? No, but I learned a lot. And if I had an issue stepping outside of my comfort zone and not, doing what the company needed right now, that might not be something that someone wants to do, that feels like they are really, really, grounded, that they're ready for that very specialist role. Now, have I got to move there? Yes. But there were also events marketing. There was, and this is on the marketing side, but I imagine it's probably true for others on the more technical side, that it may be a while before you're a specialist in your area within this context.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the biggest thing early on, and I think that's where it's like when we talk about a person coming into a startup, and then also what stage the startup is what stage are you really looking to come into, right? Because the bigger they are, then they just can't just go hire for specialties, right? Like, hey, okay, I need a data science person in this realm, but there's definitely something to be said about just having somebody that can adapt to a lot of different scenarios from the technical side, depending on how and being able to move quickly and fast, right? And so I think those are the questions that you have to ask of yourself, like what kind of
examples of that? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to.
Oh no, yeah, go ahead.
I was just curious. What are some examples of that from a technical side? I don't work as I don't know as many technical people, but where are those lines blurred where somebody who has, let's say, this specialty is able to move into other technical realms?
Yeah, I mean, I think, without trying to be too technical, I mean, I think like early on, we were kind of looking at more like full stack engineers, somebody that can kind of code across the entire code base. And then as we've grown, it's like, hey, well, no, we can get specialized in somebody that has a deep background in just the back end or just data science or AI and things like that.
I got that.
But early on, and that again, that's where you kind of look for those folks that they may not have all that experience, but can they dig in and research and solve the problem? I mean, truly be a hacker, right? At the end of the day, which is my background. I mean, like, you get on a pen test and you got to be able to figure out the technology you're testing in about a week, or you're not going to provide any value to the customer.
Yeah, no, that's so interesting. And I assume when you're hiring, let's say, a full stack person, you really do have to have that honesty of like, you're not getting a full stack person that is a specialist in every single part of that process. So you have to know your own needs deep enough, well enough to know how to make sure that person can address like a really specific, immediate piece.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, like you said, it's a balance between hiring for the needs that you have at the time, while trying to kind of keep an eye on like, hey, as we grow, what do we need to kind of keep an eye out for, in 6, 12, 2 years, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years kind of a thing, right? So,
got it. Yeah, that's great.
Well, we are, man, almost at time. This has been a great conversation.
Wow,
so, I kind of want to wrap it up here, but Mimi, do you have any final, just thoughts or takeaways on this subject you want to throw out to kind of sum up?
Well, I mean, I love talking to a startup that has the right attitude about hiring because people are looking for that. So, I think it's great. It's great to hear that. And I think anyone who is on this job search right now in this time and is falling into like the darker perspective space, I think this is just a great example of companies that are hiring, that are doing things right. And it makes me feel hopeful. So I hope it makes the world feel hopeful.
Well, thank you. And thank you for coming on. I just want to, I want you to give us a rundown of the projects that you're involved in so folks can find you, use your services. I think you got a podcast going. So why don't you tell us a little bit?
Actually, I'm so excited this is actually the first time I'm announcing it. We're still in the planning of it, but I'm going to be working with the millionaire recruiter, Brianna Rooney, and we are going to be hosting a 6-week job search chiropractics. That's what we're calling it. Little tweaks on the search to help you get, realigned. And we're going to be having internal recruiters from some of the bigger companies and some of the really cool smaller companies just to help people make tweaks on their job search. And so that should be coming out. I think we're going to be doing it in July. So it should be coming out really soon. And that's what I'm doing a lot of job search strategy. Also hiring strategies. So companies that are looking to maximize their time hiring, just looking at, what they're about to do and making sure that they have the right strategies in line to make it the most efficient and good process that it can be. And of course, I'm with the Marketing Society, close to my heart. And so if you are a cybersecurity marketer and you'd like to be a part of the community, I can send a link. And we'd love to have you. And there's a lot of amazing resources for both job searchers and hiring people, hiring managers. And just in general, if you're just trying to do your job better, you can network with other marketers and learn a lot. It's like a very friendly space. People have planned parties together at RSA through the network, just by throwing things out there and seeing who has similar interests in customers. So it's just a really wonderful community. Thanks for letting me promote it.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. And follow Mimi on LinkedIn. She puts out lots of great content, great helpful tips, and just very encouraging stuff. So
thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for the time. We really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Everybody have a great Friday.